welcome to the State and Future of Digital Marketplaces. If you can give us just another 30 seconds, we're going to let some more participants come in the channel. Hang tight, we'll be right back with you. Hi, thank you for waiting. Once again, my name is Jeff Nolan. I'm the CMO with Kahuna. I have with me today my very good friend and expert in the subject, noted digital futurist with Altimeter Group, Brian Solis.
Hello.
So we're going to talk today about some research that we commissioned with Altimeter Group that Brian led for us around digital marketplaces. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what digital marketplaces are. But let's start by highlighting couple of things. First, Q&A. We are going to do Q&A on this, so if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A channel, and we'll get to those as they come in. This will also be a recorded webinar, so it'll be available for a download, and you'll get a link after the webinar with the research that we're talking about as well. So research, webinar, Q&A, all being recorded. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. So marketplaces, this is a pretty big deal. I was surprised to see that 40% of global retail is coming out of this marketplace segment. How did that strike you?
You know, I'll tell you, when we jumped into this research, I think there were some predispositions of what we thought marketplaces were all about. And to see, though, the rapid growth, not just being suddenly, I think the one thing that we shared at the beginning of this research was that this is an overnight success 20 years in the making.
Yeah.
If we go back to, 95 with eBay, the trajectory and the scale and the acceleration of the growth, I think, is what surprised me. And to see, without cutting to the end, to see all of the traditional retailers, plus all of the innovators entering the space, plus also the expansion of services, new types of buyers, new types of sellers, it got pretty exciting pretty quickly.
Yeah, the new types of services was also interesting when we look at the evolution of three-sided markets. So two-sided markets, eBay, right? You got buyers and sellers, right? Pretty straightforward. Three-sided markets are very prevalent in transportation sectors where, DoorDash is a great example, right? Three-sided market. There's a restaurant, there's a diner, and there's a delivery person. And that third leg of the stool is driving significant growth, but it's also changing the dynamics of these businesses that are affected by it. And we've talked about from the butts and seat to food and belly, right?
Oh,
so the notion that a restaurant used to be limited by the number of tables it could serve in a night. Now with the addition of DoorDash and meal delivery services is even an additional option. You kind of completely redefine what the notion of a restaurant is. It's all about getting food to someone,
right,
regardless of whether they're having it at home, preparing it at home, or sitting in your restaurant and serving it.
Well, real quick on that, because so that everybody understands that this isn't just about, if you're in a business that has customers or business customers, this isn't just about your traditional marketplace story. This is about new types of business models that are starting to emerge as a result of the marketplace economy that is really booming. I'll give you an example, as Jeff was just talking about. I recently met with, let's just call them an international fast food brand. And the strategy that we're working on is how to develop new kitchens and new spaces in order to be able to deliver to the expanding consumer that can't get in and through a traditional station. So we'll call it an operator because of just the volume of traffic. It's too great already with customers who want to visit the establishment. And at the same time, looking at new dimensions of delivery, we're here in Redwood City, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I'm sure, Jeff, you've seen them all around, are the DoorDash robots that are they're testing as to scale yet another way of delivering food beyond the human delivery person. So this is starting to define or redefine the whole idea of commerce.
Yeah, which actually leads to this interesting notion of platform economy. And I want to talk about Amazon for a second, because literally they are everywhere, right? And retailers are fighting back successfully in some cases. If you look at like Best Buy and Walmart, I just saw on CNBC this morning that Walmart has surpassed Amazon in food delivery, grocery delivery, which was good. But the Amazon piece is relevant here because in Q2 of 2018, in Jeff Bezos' shareholder letter, it was revealed that over 50% of the goods the goods that were delivered through Amazon were shipped from third-party sellers. So the Amazon Marketplaces initiative now has 300,000 sellers. That's pretty phenomenal, and it really does point to this notion of Amazon as a platform. But Amazon isn't alone. So let's talk about what it means to be a platform economy.
Well, I'll kick that off. A few years ago, I presented at MIT. And the whole concept was bringing in geeks and thought leaders around the anticipation of the platform economy. And what I didn't appreciate was just how vast and multidimensional the idea of a platform economy was then. And since, especially with this research, looking at not just the multifaceted sides of people who participate, so vendor or technology platform, sellers, buyers, intermediaries in between, just also the integration of technologies that make it far more facilitated, intuitive, and fast, on demand and personalized, basically connecting the dots. And then also adding to that APIs and anything else that allow for a growing ecosystem to add value within that platform.
The ecosystem, yeah. And I think we, in Silicon Valley, we inherently or reflexively look at this as a technology initiative. And the technology is definitely the enabler. Without it, you wouldn't have this notion of a platform. Not the least of which is you just wouldn't have the APIs, for example, to build out your ecosystem. I think that at its core, though, this whole notion of a business model behind the marketplace is what drives their success or failure, and the embracing of it. And I read an interesting stat from a 2016 Accenture survey on this, and I don't know how many people they surveyed, but 81% of the executives they surveyed said platform-based business models will be core to their growth strategy within 3 years. Now, this is 2016, so within 3 years, we're already seeing that. And Brian, you just highlighted the international fast food company as an example of that. They are looking at this notion of their business as a platform. So I guess you could say it's the brand, but the distribution capacity that the brand has, which drives the efficiency, which enables its success.
Right, and also I think the other thing that I found fascinating in this research, and then also in the hypothesis that we had going back and forth before we kicked the research off, was what does value mean to the consumer, the ultimate consumer? Because if it's just about, like we talked regarding food in belly, right? But on the seller side of things, so we can take this international fast food brand, it also opens up the opportunity for them to have new types of services. So not just single meal delivery, but now they could cater. They could cater to businesses, they could cater to universities or schools, simply by opening up new types of spaces to facilitate that services. So it changes the value proposition and the business model as well.
In very unexpected ways, which is the exciting part. You can't always predict what's going to happen.
Right. I think that too is what, and maybe we could tease it out a little bit, but I see this as being an ongoing, for this to be, and I'm surprised we haven't mentioned yet, this is actually the first state of digital marketplace report. After all of these years, to take a look at the quick and rapid and expansive growth of this whole space, and to not only realize how far it's come, but also to keep documenting where it's going, I'm sure that we're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg of new types of service models that are evolving, not just from traditional businesses, but even the startups that we haven't seen yet.
I agree. Well, let's talk about how we did this research. So, I learned a long time ago that you got to read the fine print, right? How many people were surveyed? How many questions? what was the quantitative aspect? Because a lot of this really just comes down to interpreting data. It's not cut and dry yes or no questions. So we surveyed 100 executives, and I believe, if I recall correctly, we had 8 or 9 sectors that we distilled down into 4 major sectors that you see highlighted here. And I'm going to just, I'm not going to read every slide, but I want to highlight this. We focused on classifieds, online classifieds, multiple buyers and sellers buying and selling anything. Classifieds also have a very unique dimension where buyers can become sellers, which can become buyers again. They flip back and forth, which changes the dynamic of the marketplace considerably. Real estate portals, real estate in general, really you could say it's anything that's a high value, durable good, right? So real estate's a good example because it's not that people buy and sell homes online, but you would be hard pressed to find someone who did not use an online portal as part of their real estate journey. And then it also includes renters, leasers, commercial properties. Everything in real estate is happening online now. Transportation, self-evident, right? But not just ride sharing, but also car services, buying and selling of cars, anything that's transportation related, and then consumer services. And think about Home Advisor is a great example, right? Or TaskRabbit, where you're not buying a thing, you're getting a service that's provided for you.
Right.
Okay. Who are the personas that we looked at again on this?
Well, we looked at folks in advertising, consumer engagement, executives in marketing, and also products and services. And then on that note, too, just to go back, the real estate services, this is just something that we didn't talk about before we were going through all these notes, but I just realized that next time we run this report, I bet you that there's going to be a whole new slew of integrated services that you will be able to buy, find the house or sell the house or get a mortgage, everything on one platform instantly. And I just got excited because I love that to exist right now because I think what's also happening is the evolution of the consumer. And so that persona is not reflected in this research, but the consumer, though, is increasingly connected. They're mobile, and with that they become, I jokingly and lovingly refer to them as accidental narcissists, is that they want everything now, but they also become this sort of this form of a digital introvert. They'd rather do everything behind a screen than have to talk to somebody in many cases. And I see that as being sort of this evolving persona on the other side of the research, of which we can see it in all of us. The more connected we become, the more expectant we become.
I don't think this is generational either, because I find myself falling into the habit of texting people rather than talking with them. And, it's kind of funny because I love talking to people. But when it comes to, a painter, for example, I found a painter on Home Advisor, so free plug Home Advisor, and he was great. And I texted him. Our entire interaction before he actually showed up to work on our project was through text messaging, and I loved it. It was so convenient because I could do it uninterrupted. I didn't need to break away from something to call him up and say, "Hey, can you come out and do this? What's your quote? Let's talk about the specifics." It all happened online. I love it. Okay, so oops, I keep going too far forward on this. All right, so key findings, and I'm going to just go through these very quickly because we have more detail on each of these key findings. I'd rather focus on the detail than just summary. Marketplaces are big, right? We know that. We also have a very good perspective now on what are their strategic objectives for 2019, what are their challenges, and why sellers are disengaging, and then for attracting buyers, what are the effective strategies for doing that? So let's start by talking about how big these really are. Now, the stats here are on the slide, but they don't tell the complete story because what you're looking at here is revenue. So the marketplace is generating revenue as a percentage of the overall value of the goods and services that are offered on the marketplace. It's called a take rate, right? It's the percentage of value that the marketplace is creating by matching buyers and sellers. When you saw these numbers, how did this strike you?
I actually thought, so again, there was a shift in perspective that I had to appreciate. One is when you think about marketplaces in the sense of traditional retailers, so like Amazon or eBay, for example, those numbers are huge. But when you appreciate the rising ecosystem of new value models and new value propositions, these numbers are huge. And it forced me to open or peel back some layers to see the different types of service providers and product offerings that we were seeing in the sort of the data set that we went after. So to me, these numbers are not just big, they're also representative of an incredibly expansive landscape of different types of businesses that, look, I think anybody looking at the marketplace, I think would fall into the same trap I did, but to appreciate just how diverse it is and it's only growing.
Yeah. The other stat that caught my attention is, it's not on the slide, but it's in the report, is the employee counts that these businesses are clocking. They're very high. They were significantly lower for the size of business that they were supporting. These are very efficient businesses from a capital standpoint.
Absolutely.
All right. So we have marketplace objectives. Now, this is a very meaningful chunk section in the deck here, and I want to just focus some time on this. In some ways, this is predictable. So revenue growth, customer acquisition, margin improvement. You look at those three priorities individually, and you'll come to one conclusion. But when you look at them together, you're seeing a more complete picture. I mean, revenue growth is obvious, right? I mean, who isn't going to list that as an objective? And revenue growth is coming through customer acquisition as well as retention. But when you combine that with margin improvement, you're really getting an insight into these businesses' goals of doing it more efficiently. Right? It's not enough. I can't spend my way into growth anymore. I need to be focusing on improving our margins and accelerating our brand as a tool for acquiring new customers.
The other thing that I found was fascinating is that whether you're a traditional brand or you're an innovator or startup, is this idea that every marketplace is a technology company, just at its heart.
Yeah.
And that the top area for focusing next year, 2019, was new products and services, the launching of new products and services. And it's like any technology company, you're on an iterative cycle of whatever that is, of continually delivering value to your existing customers and also offering value to attract new customers, because what was great yesterday is not great tomorrow. And that's just the nature of that connected consumer we were talking about.
Well, we call that the third law of marketplaces. It's the notion of creating autonomous value for buyers and sellers. And this is born out of the realization that really people have choice. And if I'm buying a new car, I can go to Car Gurus, or I can go to TrueCar, or I can go to Auto Trader, or I can go to eBay Motors. Right? There's a lot of options for me, and they're all interchangeable. What differentiates them is the services that they're offering on top of. So on one hand, it's, can I also do my financing through the same portal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But also, what about valuation tools? So Car Gurus is a good example. And I just went through this and I experienced that this part of their service. They're giving you a perspective on the price of the car you're looking at relative to the national average. Is it a good deal, okay deal, bad deal, right? And I think that's really valuable. But that kind of service component is adding tremendous value for buyers. For sellers, those same services can be applied, right? So what is the optimal price to offer your product? What marketing tools should you be giving your sellers to make them more effective? Speaking of sellers, I was really surprised to see seller acquisition rank so low in terms of priorities here. 20% of the marketplaces we surveyed ranked seller acquisition as a priority. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's the trap of most technology companies in general, which is the false notion that if you build it, they will come. And I think that whereas marketplaces in its iterations, let's just say with massive explosion happening in the on-demand AA gig economy, I think that there was just too few options for sellers to join at the time, of which I think maybe lulled people into a sense of complacency, but that is probably not going to last much longer.
I was speaking with one of our customers yesterday, TickPick. And this really was surprising to me because if you think about a ticket, an event ticket, it's not like buying a pair of shoes, right? Where one pair of size 9.5 shoes is as good as the other as long as they're the same style, right? A ticket is actually very unique because it has a date, a time, and a seat, right? It's unique. And I asked them, like, do sellers offer tickets on multiple marketplaces? And if they do, how do they manage the interaction when that ticket gets acquired, taking it off all of the other? And I was surprised to learn there's an entire third-party layer of services now for managing ticket availability across multiple marketplaces. So your point's entirely spot on. Sellers have choices. They can, and they're often listing their products on multiple marketplaces at the same time.
Right. And we'll get to that later, but that they're going to stay with the ones that they're going to stay with the platforms that offer them value.
Okay, so why do they leave? Because this is one of the things we studied. Why do sellers disengage? And I want to talk about disengage versus leave. So we always think about churn, right? I'm losing a customer, I'm losing a seller. Well, what ends up really happening in these marketplaces, which is just as bad, is they don't actually leave. They just go dormant. They don't do anything. And it's that, that dormancy becomes detritus in the marketplace, right? When you've got all of these parties who aren't actually actively participating, it becomes apparent, which then drives more sellers and more buyers away. So we looked at this, we studied this. So why do sellers go dormant? Why do they disengage in the market?
Well, the number one reason was the lack of competitive differentiation. So to your point, what gets me to go to one ticket vendor versus another ticket site versus another ticket site? And I'll tell you, I just went through this process recently. And if there is just the assumption that you can facilitate transactions, for example, which was early versions of marketplaces, but still in 2018, many marketplaces are still based on that transaction experience. It's you want a ticket, you find the ticket, you buy the ticket. But I want to see, well, what's the vantage point from this seat? I want to see what other seats are available and compare those vantage points. I want to see what services are available to this particular section for the event. And it's those types of platforms that offer those capabilities to sellers to provide that view, and then also for buyers to have that experience that add to differentiation. The other ones were just sort of basic, which were insufficient sales and then also fees.
And I think, when I combine this with the 20% of the marketplaces we surveyed rank seller acquisition as a priority, I think that number is artificially low because of our survey methodology, honestly. I think the personas that we targeted are not always the ones who are responsible for seller acquisition, so we didn't actually capture their input. This is an idea, this is now something that we should go back and study again by expanding out our personas. One of the interesting things about a lot of these marketplace companies that we talk with, that we sell to, and we work with is that the buyer acquisition is very much a core marketing function, whereas seller acquisition is very often in a different group outside of marketing. It's account management.
Yeah. But I do want to bring up, because I did notice that, and looking back at our personas, which included advertising and marketing executives, and as you'll see later in terms of seller acquisition strategies, that a lot of them are marketing channels.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder if there's a hybrid role that we did account for in this survey. And of course we could be more explicit moving forward, but those channels are all marketing channels that we'll get to. And I'd be hard pressed to see that it's a different person running the same channels for buyer acquisition than it is for seller acquisition.
Yeah. Well, I think we just go back and study this as a second piece of research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
All right, the very first time I wrote this, fragmentation is a good thing, I stopped and I said, no, this is, because like everything I've ever learned in my, my professional career says fragmentation is not good, but in this case it is. And we looked at this trying to find the optimal rate for buyers and sellers. So in other words, what percentage of sellers do you want to have driving the majority of your sales? You start out with the Pareto principle, 80-20. And how did the data match up to that?
Well, let's take a step back, because I have to tell you, when we were developing this research, I was actually surprised to see that, look, there's very little research in the space. And I think the thing about it is that in the little research, they all share universally that you want the 80-20 rule. You want 20% of your sellers accounting for 80% of your business, and vice versa. You want for buyers. But I was surprised at that number. And no, the numbers did not match up to that at all. And so I think your fragmentation is a good thing is actually a very interesting point. So with that, we found that most marketplaces are much higher. So most of it is 45%. The second top response was 60 to 79% of sellers drive 80% of the activity. So that's all over the place.
Well, and I think it depends too on the type of marketplace. A classifieds business, for example, could be one-to-one, right?
Right.
Because buyers and sellers are flipping back and forth all the time. Incidentally, I asked TickPick yesterday in our interview with them about, do sellers often become buyers too? What kind of buyers do you have? And they have noticed that now there's an arbitrage happening where sellers are going online and buying tickets at the same time with an anticipation of selling them at a higher value. And that could lead to also they could be shorting them, right? I'm going to sell my tickets at a value, knowing that I can buy them back later at a lower value.
Darn those guys.
But it was interesting because that marketplace was born out of a bunch of observations in the financial sector and then applied to ticketing.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
And when you say it that way, and when Brett explains it, it's like, oh well, yeah, that makes perfect sense now. Right? But when he did it, that was pretty forward-thinking stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, supply and demand.
Yeah, this is shameless product plug here because we have on the screen a dashboard, a marketplace health dashboard, and one of the things that we do track with our clients is what is the healthy ratio of buyers to sellers based on the dynamics of your marketplace, your historical averages, and of course the sector you're in. Okay, what about buyers? So we talked about sellers, and I very purposely put that in because I think sellers are often ignored at a marketplace's peril, but we also know that buyers are driving the dollar. So why do buyers leave marketplaces?
Oh, buyers leave marketplaces because let's talk about what they want. They want choice. They want immediacy. They want convenience, and they want personalization. And I think that's the one thing that we'll get to in a bit is once you as a buyer experience something in a marketplace that is exceptional, or let's just say unexceptional, it's just so easy and intuitive that's the standard.
Yeah.
And so if that is not being met, then that is why people leave. It's 53% that they don't get what they need. And the other one is logistical challenges, because you don't have to have logistical challenges anymore, and yet too many places do. And this comes down to customer experience. And just a quick aside is that customer experience is defined as the sum of all engagements a customer or a buyer has with your service or your brand or your company. Not any one moment, it's all the moments. And since everything is moving so quickly now, and everything usually on the small screen, this is critical. And I think where there's opportunity for innovation and improvement is understanding in what areas can this be not only integrated but improved, and really thinking about, well, what's that consumer experience like? So if you're Uber and your TickPick, there are going to be similarities that you can't just look at other ticketing agencies or other ticketing services. You have to look at, well, who's the best in class in general within marketplaces, and then glean from that what you can bring back to your experience.
Yeah, and I think some of these are self-evident, right? And if you go back to Amazon is a great example, right? The inspiration for Amazon Prime was the hard data around why shopping carts are abandoned, right? Shipping costs, right? So this is something that marketplaces have as a tremendous opportunity as a value-add service, is to aggregate all of their buyers and offer discounted shipping and logistics. Now, in Amazon's case, it could be they've taken it to an extreme where you actually are warehousing your products. But I mean, marketplaces across the board could be doing that as well.
Right.
And I think our own consumer behaviors really support this point. I mean, if I don't find what I need, that's I'm gone. If I find what I need, but the cost of shipping it exceeds my threshold, I'm also gone. Right.
Yeah.
Now, there's a bunch of other reasons too, and one of the things I called out here is too many emails. One of our research revealed that 36% of buyers will abandon a marketplace because of excessive messaging. And I should say it's just emails. It's also push messaging. In-app push messaging and text messaging as well.
Yeah, and the thing that when we can drill down on this in future research, but I always say that stat is common sense, but it's very uncommon to find common sense in just business in general, right? The fact that that's so high is ridiculous in 2018, and it's also the reason for, I'm a big consumer of marketplaces, but that is they don't know me, they overhit me with stuff that is completely irrelevant. And you have no choice but to just either shut it off and remain loyal because you like the marketplace, or just completely abandon it because someone else. Those are Achilles heels, and those are opportunities for your competitors to innovate simply by delivering a better experience, more personalized engagement. And look, we live in an era of AI and machine learning, of which it's accessible.
Yeah. Well, personalization comes in here too, because I really appreciate product recommendations, but there are some products, like, for example, let's say a mattress. Like, if I buy a mattress online, I'm done for 10 years, right? I'm not going to buy another mattress. So stop recommending mattresses to me, right? Whereas if I'm buying, Keurig K-cups, I'm going to replace those. I'm going to be buying a supply of those, at a regular interval. So yeah, sure, please keep recommending those.
Yeah, or other products related to that, like
exactly.
how to keep your system running, cleaning out the pipes and the valves, all of those things.
And then I can't help but keep coming back to sellers here, because 53% of marketplaces said the lack of sellers who meet their needs are causing people to leave, yet 20% of the marketplaces said seller acquisition was a priority. How do you square those away? I mean, I guess we're just going to need to study this in more depth to really get to the bottom of it, but it just seems to be so conflicting at so many levels.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's also because just the nature of starting a marketplace is incredibly complex. I mean, obviously it's working because there's such great growth here, but you're having to bring together so many sides and so many dimensions that maybe you prioritize other things over other things. But this data, and what I think is so useful, is that it, as being the first report of its kind, it tells them this is not okay. Absolutely.
So we're coming up here to the bottom of our webinar. We're going to run a couple minutes over. We have some Q&A we're going to do, but I want to start winding down by touching on something you just said earlier about marketplaces or experiences. So you're a legitimate expert in this. You've been studying customer experiences. You've written books about it. How do you see marketplaces evolving?
So this is where I get really excited, because I'll be completely honest. I am not a traditional customer experience expert. My whole research and my whole work has been focusing on what customer experiences could be if you decided to create them today. So I think the problem that some marketplaces has is they were building on traditional retail models, and then e-commerce, and then we had mobile come in, and mobile didn't get a lot of chance to innovate because it's just simply put e-commerce onto a smaller screen. But that's when the on-demand economy started, and those were born mobile. So the reason I share that is because if you strip down what an experience is, it's just simply an emotional reaction to a moment. I want to do something. How do I feel as I go through it? That needs to be designed. It doesn't need to be based on legacy. It could be designed for what a consumer expects based on the last great experience that they had. So with that said, the next phase of marketplaces, I do believe, are going to be experiential. So they're not just going to be transactional. The transaction is just a function of the experience I want to have. So that means that we're going to lead into this with the idea of what that experience is going to look like. I'll give you an example of what experience design looks like in the wrong direction. And this is just a personal observation, which is, I think Uber, when it started, had a very simple idea, which was get a car to you, get you to where you need to go, have it all integrated within one simple system, location aware, personalization, everything, payments, just hands off, a nice seamless experience. But then they decided to get very over experiential. Let's just say, control this, control that. You have a screen now. You can see what food is along the way. You can send, receive, all kinds of things. And the menu became so complicated that it was overwhelming. And I think this is actually an opportunity for Uber to reimagine the experience. But lastly, what is what is the experience that you offer today, and what's the experience that you offer tomorrow? I think that what I expect to see in new research moving forward is companies looking at that as being a top priority for the next year, as figuring out not just what new products and services to offer, but what types of value, where we can improve value or introduce new value to continue innovation and iteration to deliver better experiences over time.
The Uber one is a great one to pick on, and I think you're right. I think Uber is a really interesting example. If I'm coming home, if I'm catching an Uber home at, like, say 5 o'clock, I actually really appreciate having an Uber Eats thing show up, says, hey, want to order dinner, right? Because I might, right? But if I'm catching an Uber to the train station, at 3 in the afternoon, I really don't want an Uber Eats promotion, right? I love what they're doing around the integrating scooters into the whole experiences as an augmentation to mass transit. I think that's also really beneficial. But you're right, it does come down to how that interaction happens on the small screen, not on the big screen.
Right.
Another example of this is one of our customers in Singapore is Carousels, Classifieds Marketplace. They have a fascinating story because, as you would imagine, in Singapore, it's an inherently mobile experience. So they started out with a design principle of you should be able to take a picture, list and post an item in under 30 seconds, and over time get that down even more. And now you start with that design objective and work backward. Well, you need to do a lot of suggestion, right? What should the title of the object be based on the picture you took? What should the price be? What should the other terms be? If you need more pictures, suggest more pictures, right? But there needs to be a lot of guided hand-holding along the way, and not assuming that an individual acting as a buyer knows what to do or can do it in 30 seconds.
Absolutely. And then again, it comes back to this era of AI and machine learning. It's not impossible to figure out intent. And going back to your Uber model, if you are going to this location, then these are the types of things you will see, also based on your history of engagement with the platform itself. So I think to your point is thinking about experience as a value add intentionally, as the platform is going to not only just generate a bigger platform economy, but now actually combine platform with experience, and then thus a platform of experience as a service.
Okay, so last slide, and let's take some questions. 5 things you must do in 2019. That's a very authoritative statement, but let's just say these are 5 things we're suggesting that you do to be successful in 2019. Right. So, deliver new experiences to buyers and sellers. And we've really emphasized here the importance of sellers in the whole marketplace equation. And I don't think this is something where you ever get good enough, right? You're constantly improving, constantly innovating. Let's say, for a real estate portal, right? Offering, financing services, insurance, home improvement, moving services. These are all things that will ingratiate yourself to buyers and sellers alike. Trust. Second law marketplace is trust, right? When you're in a matchmaking service, bringing together buyers and sellers, the product that you're offering as a marketplace really is trust. And that's something that I don't think can be overstated.
Well, speaking of trust, because we've gone through the third and the second law, maybe you should take a quick second to just quickly run through what the 3 laws of marketplace.
3 laws of marketplace as well. The first one is somewhat self-evident. It's disparate buyers and sellers. This gets back to the whole notion of fragmentation. If you have a well, first of all, if you're inventorying the goods and it's everything that you're selling is on your balance sheet, you're not a marketplace. You're a retailer, right? So you have to have multiple buyers and sellers. The more you have, the more, and the lower that ratio is between buyers and sellers, the healthier your market's going to be. Trust is your product, right? You are selling trust. Offering tools that enable buyers and sellers alike to build trust within the market is really essential. And if you as a seller don't have confidence in the buyers that are coming, if you believe they're a source of excessive customer support issues or fraud or returns, you're going to leave. You won't do business on that marketplace. Likewise, if you're a buyer and you don't believe that sellers are representing the products authentically, or they're pricing them unfairly, or their service fees are too high, you'll lose trust and leave. And then the third law of marketplaces is this notion of autonomous value, which is said in other ways, just like what value are you bringing over and above matching buyers and sellers, giving sellers the tools they need to be successful with buyers, giving buyers personalization and recommendation, right? Getting them the right message in the right channel when they want it, not just simply when you want to deliver it. All of these things come together to form essential value, to make you essential in that experience as a customer or as a buyer or a seller. And when you're viewed as being essential, not only are you going to get the retention that you need to hit the efficiency targets you have in your business, but your margins will be better. When you are essential to sellers, your take rate improves and nobody questions it because you're delivering value that's over and above that.
Absolutely.
So intuitive, right? I mean, it goes without saying that today, but I always start out with, I believe people don't set out to make things that are complicated. It just kind of ends up that way. So always pressing your product team to drive simplicity and intuitiveness is essential.
Yeah, look, that comes back to the idea of experience as a service. Mm-hmm. You can't design experiences based on the experiences that you knew or that you offered. You have to always consistently think about new opportunities for experiences, and best ideas come from outside of your sector, which is also true for bullets 3, 4, and 5, is just understanding what that consumer's experience is, and also what that consumer experience is. What's intuitive today is not going to be intuitive tomorrow, and I think that's the point. Technology is just exponential, and we have to design for those types of. We have to design agility into that type of design and that type of value service. And I'll just give you a quick example. If you go to Amazon today and you type blue dress shirt, you're going to see something probably not short of 79,000 different opportunities. I'm making that number up. But intuition then becomes now with adding AI or machine learning to understand my preferences, show me these types of blue shirts, or add into the app my ability to show a shirt like this with the camera, and then it delivers new opportunities in terms of search. So it's just constantly improving what that engagement could be based on the best-in-class examples of what consumers are experiencing outside of your service.
Okay, we talked about value-add services. So I highlighted the law marketplaces. There's another component, there's another piece to this that's really important. Sesame's bringing over our Q&A here. So network leakage, right? So network leakage is a really important topic to highlight. And when you're bringing together buyers and sellers, they actually have the capacity to go outside of your network in order to do business, right? These value-add services are essential to keeping you in the network, right? All right, so, and then finally, activating your most passionate users. I mean, this kind of goes, again, everybody wants this, but it's really hard to do. It also turns them into referrers.
Well, real quick on that, I don't know that it's as hard to do today as we imagine, right? I mean,
I don't think so,
technology is, I always say the irony of all of these advanced technologies is that they give businesses the opportunity to be more human. And essentially get back to how all of this started, which was delivering great service and great experiences to consumers as if you knew every single one of them, and you can do that today. But I also noticed as we were putting together this deck, and also the research, is that these 5 bullets, they go for any business. This is really any business. Yeah. These are the pillars of what it's going to take to be agile, innovative, successful, value-added, and experiential moving forward.
So we have some really good questions, and I want to get to those now. So one of the first ones that we didn't address when we were on that slide, but how do we differentiate? So marketplace differentiation for sellers. So the question is like, can someone clarify what does it mean for sellers to differentiate one marketplace for another? I mean, if they're all different, then they aren't the same. So why would you do business across many different marketplaces? My answer to that is, I think it's less about, for sellers, it's not about a literal differentiation of a marketplace. It's what services, what are you as a marketplace providing sellers in order for them to be successful? I think is the simplest way to put it.
Yeah, and I think like in any business, it's connecting the dots. And all too often, many companies are very good at creating a path of which sellers can get their products listed, and then basically like a storefront or store window that if a customer passes by, they can look in. But I think where value can now start to be introduced is going backwards. how does the customer find you? What's the intent of the customer in delivering services to facilitate the connecting of the dots on both ends, right? So it's basically a discovery engine. And there are many, many ways to facilitate that type of value-added services, especially in my research, Uber is very good at that because it's connecting cars. And they're connecting not just cars that are near you, but higher rankings with your ranking. And it's pretty fascinating that a lot of other marketplaces aren't borrowing from that type of model. But those are ideas where you can introduce value to sellers.
Well, what about friction? So in the same vein. So we just talked about differentiation. Well, what causes friction for sellers in a marketplace? This is another really good question from the audience. I mean, I think on friction, very simply, it's you're not helping them. It's not that you're getting in their way, but you're not giving them what they need to be successful, whether it be listing tools, messaging, right? And the same question goes for buyers. Like, as a buyer in marketplaces, what causes friction for me is a seller who doesn't respond to my inquiry, or inadequate information about the specifications of the product I'm looking at, or fitment, more importantly. And you mentioned shirts, right? Well, not every shirt is made to the same spec. So, I often have a question like, well, is size medium or size 40 shirt, what does that translate that to in a brand that I would be aware of?
Absolutely.
Friction. This is all friction.
Yeah, and I think the other thing tying this question to the last question as well is you're also helping sellers facilitate the experiential services or deliver better experiences of which they might not be capable of doing on their own. So I'll just give you an example. Restaurants. How many restaurant websites have you visited that are amazing and that have great menus and have everything? They're horrible. But some of these marketplaces are actually helping them to convey services and value that they wouldn't have been able to do by themselves.
Yeah. Well, and so speaking of restaurants, I mean, this is one where, the ability to crowdsource data becomes really critical, because I know when I see pictures for a restaurant that have been uploaded by the restaurant themselves, I'm seeing the very best table on the very best night, with all the other factors taken into consideration. Whereas when I look at the photos that are uploaded by people who've been at that restaurant, I see a much more authentic and honest picture of it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so interesting to me. I think maybe it's because I'm more cynical of online reviews, but I really need to see the evidence, right? Show me the photograph, right? Because I want to see what it looks like.
Right.
Don't just tell me it's great ambiance, right? Show me.
Show me. And then also show me the reviews that are going to be people like me or based on the experiences that I prefer.
Yeah.
Because I think I struggle as a consumer as well, and I'm sure others, is the friction on both sides. As a seller, you want the right buyers to find the right reviews, and as a buyer, you want to find the right reviews in order to basically find the right sellers and the right products. And these are all opportunities to reduce friction. And it surprises me that the legacy companies struggle there, but it's absolutely where the startups zone in on.
Yeah. And I TripAdvisor, so I remember years and years ago looking at these reviews and looking at hotels, and you'd find the one-star review, and you'd go and read it. It was like some guy who sprained his ankle and had a terrible vacation. It really had nothing at all to do with the hotel. But it sucked. 1 star.
Or on the other side of having to comb through all of the reviews to find that person who's telling you the experience that you can kind of value, whether it's the shape of the room or the location or the restaurant or whatever it is that you can relate to, and how much time you as a consumer have to spend to do that.
Which gets back to another question, which is accountability, right? How do you build that in? And I think marketplaces that truly differentiate themselves are going to build a customer service experience in, because if my home advisor example, right? If the painter did a terrible job and then wanted to charge me a bunch of extra fees and left all of their trash in my front yard, I need somebody to call, right, at that point. And home advisor needs to give me that guarantee that the experience that I'm expecting will be delivered.
It's funny that you say that, because in this research, that is more important than I think this data accounts for, is service. And for example, when Uber and Airbnb initially launched, they were notorious for having the worst customer service.
No customer
service. Yes, no customer service. They're getting better at that, I'd say, but they're getting better at that around common circumstances. Did I leave my phone in the car? You know, right. So they're sort of automating that. It's an area where they can all get better, because if you come back to customer experience, it's one of the touch points that define the overall experience.
Yeah, well, and I think Airbnb deserves credit here because they have a track record of making it right. Doesn't mean that things are going to not go wrong, but when they do, you need someone to turn to.
Right.
And I've talked about TickPick as at a couple of times in the webinar here. TickPick is absolutely focused on this. They offer a guarantee that the ticket you get is authentic, that you're going to get into the event. And if you have some personal situation that comes up, like an emergency, where you can't use the ticket, they're going to work with you to make that right. And I find, as a buyer in these marketplaces, that kind of devotion to customer service is an integral part of my customer experience as much as the product itself.
Right.
Even if I don't use it, just knowing it's there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. We've run over, which seems to be a common thing that Sesame will no doubt remind me of after the webinar. But we had such a great discussion, it was hard to stop. We're going to post this online. It'll be available for full download. And then the additional Q&A that comes in, we're going to address in the presentation as well. And the research will be available to you in follow-up. Thank you again for your time, and have a great rest of your day.